Today's episode of Parenting Great Kids is made possible by Be Frugal. Next time you're shopping online, you have to try Be Frugal. Be Frugal lets you earn up to 40% cash back on your purchase from over 5,000 stores, including Amazon, Walmart, Target, Macy's, and more. Simply shop online as you normally would, then click the link on BeFrugal.com and cash back is sent to you via check, PayPal, or Amazon gift card. You can even stack your coupons and cash back to get the best possible deal. Best of all, everything about using Be Frugal and earning cash back is 100% free. You'll even get a $10 welcome bonus upon joining. So visit BeFrugal.com/Meg and get a $10 bonus when you join for free. And by Julian KRINKSY Camps and Programs. Julian KRINKSY Camps and Programs is not your ordinary summer camp. With over 20 programs for ages 7 to 18 and students from 40 different countries, your child will have a once-in-a-lifetime experience. Students enjoy programs in business, cooking, pre-college academics, the arts, tennis, golf, and more, all on college campuses in the Philadelphia area. Get 10% off with promo code JKCP2017 at jkcp.com/Meg. For 30 plus years, I've seen every type of child grow up.
Instead of giving me what I wanted, she gave me what I needed, which was truth.
Don't let emotions win. Let truth win.
Do your very best, and you should have a lot of fun while you do it. And the better you get at something, the more fun you're going to have at something.
You moms and dads are wired with everything you need to be a parent to a great kid. Welcome to Parenting Great Kids. This is episode number 31. When Parenting Isn't Perfect. I'm your host, Dr. Meg Meeker, and today I'll be talking with my friend Jim Daly, who's a president of the international organization Focus on the Family. He's also the author of a brand new book, When Parenting Isn't Perfect. Also in this episode, I'll be answering a question from a dad with a 6-year-old having some potty problems. As always, I'll share my points to ponder so you can get working right away. And parents, as a reminder, don't just download the episodes, click subscribe. Because when you do that, you're joining my parenting revolution and every new episode will automatically show up in your subscribed list. You won't regret it. And we'd love for you to write us a review on iTunes and let us know what you think about the podcasts. Also, not only are we on iTunes, but the Parenting Great Kids podcast is also now available in the Google Play Store and on Stitcher. So no matter where you get your podcasts, subscribe today and don't miss a single episode. So now, let's tackle my points to ponder. First, don't let mistakes trip you up. You will hear Jim Daly talk a lot about how we parents ruminate on the mistakes that we made. And here's the thing, we're all going to make mistakes with our kids. And the truth is we probably make the most mistakes with either our first child or the child who reminds us most of ourselves. You've heard it said that very often the mother butts heads most with the oldest daughter in the family, and the same is true with dad. We tend to butt heads with the kids that are most like us, and it can be really, really tricky. So the truth is, many of us will make more mistakes with one child than with the other child. But it's very important that when we make mistakes with our kids, that we not only go to our kids and ask them for forgiveness, but we don't stop there. We forgive ourselves. It's very, very important because I think that parents are often our own worst enemy. You know, we have these tapes in our heads that say, you shouldn't have that and you shouldn't have that. And boy, if only you would have done that, then your son or your daughter would be in a different place, or they'd be happier, or they'd be more musical, or whatever. And we feel responsible for everything that our kids do or don't do. And we feel responsible because we've made a lot of mistakes. So don't let your mistakes trip you up. Kids are okay with our mistakes. You'll hear Jim talk about that, and Jim has a tremendous amount of experience in this area. He grew up with a father who was an alcoholic and who died young, and then his mother died young, and he was orphaned, and then he lived with foster parents, and he experienced a whole lot, and so he really knows what it feels like as a kid living with parents who make a lot of mistakes. So he can really speak about this and give us a lot of wisdom here. So we cannot let our mistakes hold us back or trip us up. Second, focus on getting the big stuff right in parenting. You know, I tell parents that it's very important not to get caught up in the tiny little details, how to say something, when to do something. You know, should we discipline for this or should we discipline for that? Or should our kids be allowed to do this? Or what age should they get a cell phone? Or, you know, we get caught up on a lot of the details. But the truth of the matter is what really changes who our kids become are the big things that we do. And those big things happen in just the daily living of life. You know, the taking the kid out in the backyard and throwing a baseball with him, the picking him up from school and taking them out for an ice cream cone. You know, those touchdown points that feel like the big moments in a kid's life who really shift their identity and give them that security. So we have to remember that the best part of our parenting comes in getting the big stuff right. You know, my parents made a lot of mistakes and they knew they made a lot of mistakes. But what you need to understand as a parent is that kids are willing to forgive all of those things as long as you try hard to get the big stuff right. Show them that they're really loved. You will hear Jim describe life with his dad, who was an alcoholic, and you would listen and hear, well, how in the world did you turn out to run an international organization where you're talking about how to parent well and how to keep your kids connected to you? And he beautifully points out that, you know, his father, yes, he was an alcoholic and he made a lot of mistakes, but every once in a while, when he was sober, he really communicated to Jim that he loved him a tremendous amount, and that was good enough. So focus on getting the big stuff right. Third, give yourself kindness. Show yourself some grace. You know, so many times we try so hard to be kind to other people and forgiving with other people, and we certainly try to do that with our kids. But what we forget is how to be kind to ourselves. And there's no place it's more important to show kindness to ourselves than in our parenting. Because our parenting is the place where we really want to excel. Every single parent who's listening to me now wants so much to be better. Well, the truth of the matter is you're already better. You're already great, but you just don't feel like it because perhaps you haven't forgiven your mistakes or you're not willing to show yourself some kindness. So please be kind to yourself. Give yourself a pass. I'm not saying make excuses for all the ways you messed up. That's not what I'm saying, but I'm saying confront those and then say, okay, let's move beyond. I can be kind to myself and I'm going to forgive myself and I'm going to park it in the past and I'm not going to allow myself to bring it up again. It's so important to show yourself that kindness. You know, we're often so much nicer to strangers than we are to our kids. And we're so much nicer to our kids than we are to ourselves. But we need to really shift that. We need to be very, very kind to ourselves. Because remember, it's not only important for us to free us in our parenting so that we can parent and have a lot more fun. We can be a lot more courageous. We don't have to be so fearful. But it's a good model to show our kids that we enjoy parenting because this parenting stuff really can be fun. It really is about fun. And the truth is you can have fun parenting teenagers if you give yourself some kindness and you hold your mistakes loosely and you forgive yourself for them. So those are my 3 points to ponder for today. Friends, it's finally here. My new book, Hero, Being the Strong Father Your Children Need, is now available for purchase. You've heard me talking about it for a while, and I'm so happy to tell you that you can get your copy now at HeroDadBook.com. Dads, whether you know it or not, you are the center of your child's life, and that's exactly what this book is all about. Moms, this is a great book for your husbands, and husbands, this is a great book for you. Hero is a book for all dads, whether they're married, divorced, widowed, or stepdads. All that matters is understanding that your children need and want you. And if you want what is best for you and your children, then you need this book. When you visit HeroDadBook.com, You'll also find a variety of hero gift bundles, some with a coffee mug, a journal, and even a hero t-shirt. We created these special gifts to serve as reminders for you, Dad, to choose to be the hero in your child's life every day. And they also make great Father's Day gifts or birthday gifts. Visit HeroDadBook.com to learn more and order your copy today. So parents, thanks for listening. This is episode number 31. Stay with us. I want you now to listen in on a conversation I had with my friend Jim Daly about when parenting isn't perfect. I know you're going to enjoy it. Well, I'm excited to have my guest today, Jim Daly, who is head of Focus on the Family. Jim, thanks so much for being here.
Meg, it's great to be with you. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I love talking with you, and I love picking your brain. There's so much in there, and I love sort of pulling it out and learning something every time I talk to you. Your latest book, Parenting Isn't Perfect, releases June 27th, and you've written a lot of other books, but how is this different from your other parenting books?
Yeah, being here at Focus on the Family, I know there's many, especially Christian parenting books that talk about boundaries and talk about, making sure you reinforce the rules. And those are all important things. There's no doubt about it. But I was feeling like there's nothing out there that's stressing the importance of the relationship with the child. And we need to maintain that relationship. As you know, Dr. Meg, being a pediatrician, I mean, how many people have walked into your offices that, they're heartbroken because their kids are no longer walking with them, or They don't want to be a part of the family. And I think so much of that is around relationship. Kids are imperfect, and guess what? We parents are too. And that's a great place to start. You're
absolutely right. And I think that, particularly in this day and age with so much information out there, a lot of the younger parents, particularly millennial parents, read so much and they have so much information about parenting that I feel they're very anxious because they feel, I'm not going to get it right. I'm not going to get it right. I can't do this. Should I immunize? Should I not immunize? And they're all wound up. So I love the idea that you are coming out and saying, look, parenting really isn't perfect. Don't worry about it. Your kids don't want you to be perfect. So just start with what you have and go with that.
It's exactly right. Aim for good.
That's the
theme I like. Aim for good, because that's good. If you can hit good, you're in a good spot with your parenting.
Absolutely. Now, you have a very interesting background, and a lot of my listeners may not know your story. So would you mind sharing a little bit about your background and how that had such an influence on your writing and your career and the work you're doing now?
Well, first of all, I never thought I would be the president of Focus on the Family. I remember when Dr. Dobson said, I want you to be the guy. I was like, no, I don't want to be that guy.
Yeah.
But the irony of it, as I wrestled through it, my wife Jean and I, as we talked it through, she was so helpful to give me perspective. A godly wife, that is where you need that input, and hopefully you have the ears to hear. But she was saying, in essence, Dr. Dobson came from a really good background, and not a perfect family, he would say, but a good family. Mm-hmm. And for me, the irony was I came from an utterly broken family. I had an alcoholic father. My mom and dad divorced when I was 5. I have 2 older brothers, 2 older sisters. My mom remarried when I was 8.5. She died when I was 9.5. And my stepfather walked out of the family. I ended up in foster care for a year. My biological father reappeared, still having problems with drinking. My sister and I were the only 2 under 18 at that point. I was 11. And we moved back in with him, and I was with him for a year. Then he died, and I moved in with my brother, Dave, who was married to his 16-year-old wife. And I was about to go into junior high, my 7th grade year. And that had been my first, 11, 12 years of my life, just utter chaos. Mm-hmm. And it taught me many things. And one, I think, was that idea that our passion often is born out of our pain. I think for me, for family, that's why I went to school. I went to college. I was on a business career track. And all of a sudden I got a call from Focus. They said, would you like to work here? And I was like, wow. I would like to give my life to something like that, because I want to prevent as many children as I can prevent from having that kind of childhood, because it was brutal.
Yeah.
And I missed so much emotionally with my mom and dad. I knew they loved me, but they just had real issues.
Yeah.
And we can learn a lot through that. And even with my fathering today, I mean, I tell my kids every day I love them and I'm proud of them. And it's something I never heard.
I think that a background like yours, Jim, is so helpful when you're writing a book like Parenting Isn't Perfect, because your parents were nowhere near perfect. Your foster parent, your brother, do you feel like you were parented at all?
In some ways, yes. In other ways, no. My mom was really great at loving us and teaching us the golden rule and kind of the basic principles, but she wasn't a helicopter mom by no means. I mean, I was out playing in the streets of Compton when we lived in Compton, California, from 9 in the morning till 3, 4 in the afternoon. I mean, I'd go to school, but then I'd come home and have 2-3 hours to just play outside. I mean, think of letting your 8-year-old out in the streets of Compton.
Wow.
I mean, that just was breathtaking now when I think about it. But back then, my mom just had, I think, a good idea that I had good judgment. I wouldn't do anything that was out of line. And that was me as a kid. And that's one of the things as a parent, you've got to know your children well and to study them and really spend time with them and listen to them and talk with them. And I've done that with my boys. I have 2 very different children. I remember my older son, he got into some trouble on some things. And I remember Jean, my wife, was devastated and she was crying in the garage. And I got home from work and I said, what's the matter? She said, oh, one of our boys is not doing well and it's all our fault. We're not good parents. And I said, yeah, but the other one's doing great. So what's our parenting? And here's the bottom line. And you know this, Dr. Meg. I mean, parenting is not formulaic.
No.
You don't do A and B and C and get D. It doesn't work that way. Just ask God. He had Adam and Eve, and they didn't turn out so well.
Right, and he's perfect.
He's
and
the
God's
perfect parent.
Yeah, exactly. But you're absolutely right, and I think that you can do the same thing with 2 different kids, or think you're doing the same thing, and they come out very, very differently. And they go through different seasons. One of your sons was in a great season, the other one wasn't. But that switches and that changes. But for you personally, Jim, you're a parenting expert. You just wrote a book, Parenting Isn't Perfect. You know a lot about parenting. You're president of a huge organization, international organization focused on the family. How did you go from such a painful, chaotic childhood where the only real parenting you knew was your mother to this place where you could be a good dad?
Well, and it's a great question, and I think the answer in that is, one, although my dad had a lot of demons, the one thing he made me feel was special. And I don't know how to explain that. He was drunk on Friday night, but every Saturday morning, he'd cook me breakfast.
Wow.
And he'd run his hands through my hair and say, you are a special boy, you know that? And just those kind of, what I would say are minimal connection points. Think of the power that had in my life. And that's the kind of power any father can have. Some attention, some love, some expression of you are good enough. And it does wonders for the little boy or the little girl's heart to come alive and say, okay, my daddy loves me, my mommy loves me. And I think getting back to the original question of the need for that and what's most important in parenting, I would find more important than rules and regulations and enforcement of those things, albeit they are important. But more important is your love for your child and their knowledge that you love them. And we can say it, but do we mean it and do we express it? That's the concern. And sometimes I can see that in my own parenting where I get really into the rules. You broke the rules. This is it. It's all over. I remember one time I was parenting Trent, my oldest son, and I'd give him a little swat, and he went upstairs, and I always had a habit of coming up after discipline, and I'd hug him and say, I love you. You got to know I love you, but that behavior is not acceptable. And we went through that routine, and he wouldn't talk to me. He'd shake his head. I said, can you talk to me? And he'd give me a big no shake. I said, well, can you write down on a piece of paper what you're feeling? And he'd give me a big yes shake. So I went and I got pen and paper, and I put it in his hands, and I said, how do you feel when Daddy disciplines you? And he wrote, it feels like you don't love me.
Oh.
And what a great insight.
Yeah.
He was teaching me
Yes.
on how to be a better dad. And what does that mean? It doesn't mean I'm pulling back boundaries or pulling back discipline. I just knew I had to go over the top and say, before I do this, you got to know your daddy loves you. I love you so much. But that behavior was beyond the pale. Mm-hmm. And there's consequences to that behavior, and here's what it will be. And you knew that, and you broke the rule, and now there's consequences. And as I practiced that more effectively, I saw in him this ability for him to be more accepting of his responsibilities. And that was really powerful. I remember the other thing, going into his bedroom one night, and this, if everybody misses the whole point, this is the one to catch. I remember he was in the top bunk bed, and I had corrected him on something. I felt bad the way I had done it. Too much anger, too much kind of, just sharpness in my voice. So I went up, his bedtime, tucked him in. I looked at him. I said, Trent, I got to apologize to you because the way I dealt with that was not right. And I want to say I'm sorry. And a big smile broke out on his face.
Wow.
And I said, well, why are you smiling? He goes, I didn't know parents had to apologize.
That's pretty good.
But what a great lesson.
It's huge. It's huge. It's interesting. In Parenting Isn't Perfect, you talk a lot about unconditional love and conditional love. It keeps winding its way through. When you were talking about how your son didn't feel loved, my experience as a listener of kids through the years has been that many kids will tell me, a child who's struggling, I will routinely say, tell me who loves you in your life. And they'll look at me with a blank stare. And the interesting thing is, many times I know that child's parents. And I know the parents love him, but that child will say, well, my mom does, because my mom has to, but I don't know. I'm not even sure. Now, I know the dad loves that child, but the child didn't feel it. So how can parents make sure that their child feels loved? You learned it because your son actually said, I don't feel loved when you discipline me, Dad. So how can a parent communicate to their child? And particularly, you can talk to the dads because you're a man and you grew up as a son with a dad. How can dads make sure that their child feels that they are unconditionally loved?
Yes, and I'll say for moms, it seems to come so much more naturally to you.
Yes, so I think
God
so.
Bless you, and you just know what to do. I think for dads, it's a bit of a wild card, and I think even in our marriages, think about the hole in a spouse's heart because their husband rarely expresses any kind of romantic love. Just to say I love you. That's one of the great deficits in marriages today. And I think we take that same mentality right into our parenting that, well, I told him I loved him I probably a year ago, but I told him he should remember that. Yeah. And it's so absurd of us to think that, once a year is sufficient to tell your son or daughter that you love them. And I would love to make sure every father lives by that adage that, hey, every day try to outdo your negatives by 5 times the positives. So if you're on your child for something, make sure 5 times sometime in that day you're saying, you know what, you did that. That was really good what you did there. I love your heart. Your heart's awesome. I try not to comment on their physical stature or their kind of their physical attributes, which they can't change.
Right.
But things like their attitude and like the way they approach their friends or just noticing something that you can say, that was awesome, way to go. I think that does so much to invest in their character development and in their sense of self-worth and well-being. And dads play a huge role in that because we are the wild cards and we often choose to be quiet or we don't observe, which there's a duh. Again, men are really not that observant when it comes to those kind of behavioral things. Just slow down so you can see the good things your kids are doing and then let them know. Don't assume they know you know.
Exactly. Because they don't. And they're kids and they think very differently. And even though a father in his heart knows he loves a child and he said, well, 3 months ago I told him I loved him. Why do I have to repeat it? You have to repeat it because it's a kid. And to the men out there, you have to repeat it to your wife because we need to hear things over and over and over. That's just how our brains work. It's interesting because what I have found is that kids don't mind being disciplined necessarily. Parents are always wound up about discipline and how to discipline and how to be effective and if I go over that. I say, kids will give you so much grace if you balance your discipline with fun and you don't constantly bring, that bad act into the future. Once you're done disciplining it, pretend like it never happened and go out and have some fun. But a lot of times parents get so emotionally wound up, they're still mad at the kid 3 days later for what he did. And that's what makes kids, not feel very loved. But loving our children well is a really tough thing. I want to get onto another section in your book where you talk about the lie of the ideal. Would you mind giving our listeners a taste of what you mean by that phrase?
Well, for me, that overused statement, it's like a Pinterest moment where everything's perfect. And the lie of the ideal when it comes to the family is so often we see our friends and their families in their best moment, whatever it might be, at church or what have you, and you're going, boy, if you would just act more like their kid.
Yeah, exactly.
We'd be a lot happier as parents because, look, they go to class, they're going to Bible study, they're saying yes, sir, and no, sir. And yet at the same time, if you were to peel back the onion of that family, you're going to see some very disruptive times. And so often what we do as adults, as parents, is we tend to measure our worst time against their best time.
Right.
And that's not a healthy thing to do. And normal is good and bad moments, and that is normal. And the key, I think, is to make sure you're not taking the measure of everybody around you. Just know what is right and what is good and apply that in your family, knowing you're going to stumble at times. Your kids will stumble. You're going to stumble. You'll need to say you're sorry. Hopefully your kids will learn that and say they're sorry in those moments as well. So when you're talking about that ideal, I think that's a crusher that somehow we have to be Stepford children. I remember a reporter came to our house one time, and Denver Post, and they wanted to take photos right when I took over from Dr. Dobson at Focus on the Family. I was a little nervous about it, but I said yes. My kids were probably 3 and 5 at the time. But they came down, and the reporter spent time with Jean and with me, and then she said, if you don't mind, I'd like to ask your kids some questions. So they were out on the trampoline. They came in, and they're sitting at the breakfast nook there, and she said, I hear your dad says something every day to you. What is it? And my little 3-year-old Troy goes, clean your room. Eat vegetables. And he starts going through this list, and then Trent jumps in and starts adding to the list. And she's howling. She's cracking up.
Oh, yeah.
And then she says, no, really, what does he say? And they looked at each other and said, he says he loves us. And she said after that, she's not a believer. And she said, I expected the Stepford children being the kids of the president of Focus on the Family. And what a shame. Yes. Because it takes the humanity out of who we are as Christians and believers. We're normal people. Right. We just believe in Jesus who covers our sins. Right. But we still have difficulty in this life. And I think for her to see that and to see that our kids had a sense of humor at that early age, she loved it. Yeah. And I think that's so important for families. We've got to have that sense of humor and foster it in our kids because that will help them through many dark times.
Yes, absolutely. And you can even incorporate it into your discipline sometimes. I remember my oldest daughter was giving me a hard time, and I was disciplining her, and she got really, really angry with me. She was probably 12 or 13, and we were standing in the kitchen, and she saw this big bucket of water. I don't know what it was doing there.
We know where this is going.
Yeah, and so she was so mad. She picked up that bucket and she threw it at me, and I was stunned. Well, you know what I did? I went and I filled it up and I threw it back at her. And, the fun thing is, we both remember that moment because we stunned each other, because I couldn't believe she did it, but she couldn't believe I did it back to her. That here I was serious and I was angry, and all of a sudden I was sort of very playful with her.
And that's what you talk about.
Yes. And in many ways, we take this job of parenting so seriously, and it is serious. But the truth of the matter is, we are so imperfect, and, we have limited power in our children's lives. They are their own people, and we're here to sort of bend them this way and bend them that way, but they have their own personalities. But if we can just give ourselves a break periodically, I think that makes us better parents. And I think that's what I love about your book, is it allows parents to give themselves a break and say, hey, if the president of Focus on the Family, this huge international organization, tells me it's okay that, I just basically have to get the big stuff right. Well, that's pretty good. And I think tremendous amount of relief. And that's when you really start to enjoy parenting a whole lot more.
Oh, without a doubt. You are on it. That's exactly it, Meg.
Parents, I hope you're enjoying my conversation with Jim Daly. We need to take a quick break right now, but don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Sick kids, elderly relatives, emergency visits to the vet. Sometimes you need an extra set of hands, often when you least expect it. With access to 8.6 million caregivers across 16 countries, Care.com is the world's largest digital marketplace for finding and managing family care. You're sure to find the local caregivers you need, including housekeepers, dog walkers, senior care, tutors, and errand runners. Getting started is easy. Just sign up for free as a basic member to post a job and view in-depth caregiver profiles that include work experience, certification, and special skills. Then, once you upgrade to premium membership, you can reach out to them, schedule interviews, and even book and pay for care online or through their app. Whether you need childcare while you're at work or want to line up a date night sitter, Care.com makes life simpler for families everywhere. To save 30% off a Care.com premium membership, visit care.com/Meg to subscribe. That's care.com/Meg. BARKBOX is a monthly delivery of all-natural treats and super fun toys curated to meet your dog's unique needs, including allergies and chew preferences. It's a great way to try a variety of USA Canada-made treats and unique toys from local and small businesses that you may not otherwise be able to find. Plus, each box is centered around a different theme like country fair, bark ball, Pooh York City, or Brooklyn hipster to keep dogs engaged, interested, and happy. And when your dog falls in love with something from the box, you can easily find it again on barkshop.com, the BARKBOX app, or by texting BARKBOX. For dogs, it's like the joy of a million belly scratches. But if for some reason your dog doesn't like something in the box, BARKBOX will send you something they will love for free, because they're all about dog happiness. Better yet, every BARKBOX ships free within the continental U.S. Friends, I love BARKBOX because I have a dog and feel really good about giving him all natural treats, and the toys really are fun. Visit BARKBOX.com/parenting and get a free extra month of BARKBOX when you subscribe to a 6 or 12-month plan. That's BARKBOX.com/parenting for an extra month free.
Jim, what do you think as a father are the biggest struggles for fathers today in parenting, particularly the younger fathers? What do they struggle most with, do you think?
There's so many things. I think one is time. I mean, here at Focus on the Family, that's typically what we hear from dads about. You know, my job takes me in a lot of different directions. I travel a lot. I'm not there for my kids. I feel guilty about it. I'm not sure what to do. I'll tell you one thing I did. Just find time in your calendar. You know, if you've got a lot of paperwork you got to do at night because of your job or whatever you have to do, try to get home at a reasonable time, 5:30. Spend time with the kids. Have dinner together. That's so critical. Just not because you need to eat together. It's because you're speaking to each other.
Yes.
They're learning from you. The values are being transmitted. They're getting to know you in that hour or so at the dinner table. That's one of the best times of the daily household. We laugh. We have milk come out our nose at times. We're laughing so hard. But it's so much fun. And then, you know, play with them a bit. Get out. Forget TV, man.
Yeah.
Just forget it. It's such a sucker of time. And then when you tuck them in 8:30, you know, try to spend that 10, 15, 20 minutes with each other as spouses and communicate. And then if you need to do paperwork, then do it. And that's what Jean and I kind of worked out, was that kind of rhythm in our home. And it meant just about every night I was home and not traveling. I was with the kids, with the boys, tickling them, playing in the basement, having fun. That connection point is so important. So time is the biggest issue. I think the other is parents, dads particularly, we get really awkward when they become teenagers and we begin to disengage because we don't know what to do.
Right.
They're not listening to us anymore. Our word isn't that important to them. We're fumbling around our girls because they're beginning to blossom and we don't know what to do.
I've seen you, men.
And we need mom to come alongside and say, you know what? Your daughter needs your hugs.
Yeah.
Just make them appropriate, and your son needs to hear from you. Even if you don't think he's listening, guess what? He's listening.
Yes.
Don't get frustrated. And I think for men, too, one of the mistakes we make is we don't believe any of what I just said. And so we get frustrated because our 16-year-old's not doing what we've asked them to do. Try unique ways, different ways to get them motivated. Don't go right to the rules, breaking the rules, no electronics, take this away, take that away. Try some new things, whatever that might be. It could be as simple as saying, you know what, I'm going to expect you to get this done because someday you're going to have a job and your employer is going to need you to do that without being told to do it. So by tomorrow morning, however you want to get it done, whenever you want to get it done, but by tomorrow morning, it gets done. Can we do that? And have them buy in to whatever the chore might be or whatever the challenge is. Rather than giving them ultimatums, give them choices.
That's great.
And you can do it now or you can do it an hour from now. Yeah. But let's get it done before you go to bed tonight.
You have had to learn different ways to motivate kids or discipline kids because you have foster kids.
Yeah, we have.
What unique challenges have you encountered with children who come to you wounded?
Well, one is the depth of those wounds. You see where kids have borne the scars of not just terrible parenting, but horrific parenting and emotionally wounding, sometimes physically wounding parenting. And so you see parents who can't control their anger and you get what's left over in that foster situation. And I would only say for Christians, if you have the capacity and you pray about it and you feel called to engage it, I would encourage you to do that. We have too few Christian families involved, and these little munchkins, they need people who will love them. And they will challenge that love. That's one of the things they do. You really love me? Well, what if I do this or do that or kick your shin? Or, you just never know what's going to happen. So in that context, you have to be really kind-hearted and loving, and you have to absorb a lot of their emotion. And you got to realize they're not stabbing at you. They're really stabbing at their mom and dad. And in that context, we saw some great victories in our foster care provision, but also some great challenges, just terribly wounded kids. But those are things we can apply to our bio kids as well.
Exactly. It takes so much time because I think that a lot of times, people who have foster kids or they adopt kids who are older in life, they expect within a year that these kids are going to be lovey and huggy with them, but they're not, because these kids have to, as you said, they test you and they want to see if you really mean it and if you're going to stay there and if you're going to treat them like they've always been treated. So, I just think, patience to foster parent, you have to be really patient. But I love what you said because, when the kids act out, it's not about you. They're not acting against you. They're really acting against their parents or whoever hurt them. And even, to some degree, against themselves. Jim, we only have a couple minutes left. In your book, and I know this is really putting you on the spot, but you can do it.
Okay.
2 great takeaways from Parenting Isn't Perfect. What are the 2 things you want every parent who reads this book to know?
I think one, understand that parenting is not formulaic, that your children have a free will, and you could do a wonderful job parenting, and your kids may still struggle in certain areas. But stay the course, and don't break that tether of love. Maintain relationship with your children at all costs, including the rules. So that's one big one. The other, I'd say, would be don't be afraid of messes. Messes are going to happen, whatever that looks like. Try to keep yourself under control. You're the one with the adult brain. Take a deep breath. Don't get into a tit for tat with your teenagers. Just say, you know what? I'm really not in a good place to be arguing about this right now. Let's pick it up in the morning. I'll be a lot calmer.
Yeah.
And walk away. You're the adult. Don't be baited into that fight with them because you know what? Even at that age, they're really good at winning.
They wear you down because they have more energy. And just because you're in a mess as a parent doesn't mean you're a failure. I think a lot of times parents think, my kid is acting this way because I'm a really bad mom or a really bad dad. And, my neighbor down the street, her kids would never act this way because she's better. And I know women do that. I don't know if men do that. But we really get inside our head and we start talking to ourselves about what a bad job we're doing because our kids are acting up or doing whatever. And it's so self-defeating and it makes us worse parents. So I agree with you. It's wonderful advice. Just take a time out and regroup in the morning and pick things up again. You have so much wisdom to share with people. And I sure appreciate you coming on our podcast today, Parenting Great Kids, because everybody who listens, everybody wants to be a better parent. And they can be. And they don't have to be perfect parents. They can be very wonderful, imperfect parents and get the big stuff right. How can our listeners keep up with you, Jim, and find out more about your book? Again, Parenting Isn't Perfect is releasing June 27th, but how can people follow you?
FocusOnTheFamily.com is the best way to get a hold of all the information here, Focus. My blog is there, and of course, you can get the download of the broadcast and all those kinds of things. But we so appreciate it, Dr. Meg. I mean, you're in this. You've done it professionally for so many years. And I'm just grateful for people like you who put an arm around me as a kid and said, you know what? You're a good kid.
Yeah.
That meant the world to me, whether it was my pediatrician or my football coach or whoever it was. And you've done that with so many families. Thank you for just being that bright light and encouraging people to do better.
Thank you so much. Parenting well and loving people well is simple, but it's really hard. But aren't the simplest things the hardest things to do? That's like Jesus said, love your neighbor as yourself. Okay, got that one. Oh, yeah, right, you got that one. It's very simple, but it's very hard. Well, Jim, thank you for all the work you do. Blessings on Focus on the Family. It's a wonderful, wonderful organization. FocusOnTheFamily.com if anybody wants to learn about what's going on there or take a peek at Jim's new book or any of his other books. He's got some wonderful other books, The Good Dad, The Best Year of Your Marriage, and others. So thank you so much, and God bless.
Thank you, Dr. Meg. Take care.
All right, let's get social. I want to hear from you, and I want to interact with you. You can connect with me on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at MegMeekerMD, or if you have a question, please send it to AskMeg at megmeekermd.com. Today, I have a question from Russell, who writes, Dear Dr. Meg, we have a 6-year-old son who can't seem to make it through the night without peeing. He potty trained easily and has no issues during the day, but he still needs a diaper at night. He wakes up to a full diaper almost every morning. We've tried many, many times to go without a diaper, and we can't seem to get him to feel the urge to pee during the night and get up and go potty. I want to tell you, Russell, you are in great company because you're not alone. I see many 6-year-olds and 5-year-olds and 7-year-olds and even 8-year-old boys who have difficulty staying dry at night. The first thing you need to realize is this. It's not his fault. This is not within your son's control. He is a very deep sleeper and he just doesn't wake up. Secondly, this is not a psychological issue and it probably is not a physiologic issue. Many parents ascribe too much to potty training, whether it's pooping or peeing. Parents get very wound up in their kids' inability to get it right. I want to tell you something about 6-year-old boys. They have a lot of stuff they want to do during the day, so they run really hard. A lot of 6- and 7-year-old boys do not want to stop to eat or go to the bathroom. So they just bypass those cues. They don't really care about that. They get hungry, but then they say, well, I got stuff to do, so I'm not even going to pay attention. And the same is true with going to the bathroom. So the fact that your son is potty trained during the day tells me that he really is tuned into his cues of his bladder and he's stopping, and that's a great thing. And that also tells me that he gets very tired during the day. There's nothing wrong with his bladder because he can control it. But when your son goes to bed at night, he goes to bed. And that young man cycles all of his sleep cycles beautifully, and he's just not going to wake up. That urge to go to the bathroom is not going to penetrate his deep sleep. Now, pediatricians usually don't intervene until kids are closer to 7 or 8, and I will tell you that. So if you take your son to the pediatrician and say, please help, do something with my son, your pediatrician probably is not going to intervene with medication or alarms or anything like that until he's about 7 or 8. And even then, I am very hesitant. I don't give kids medications that wake them in the night, that decrease their sleep and allow them to feel those cues, because I just think that's going into kind of dangerous territory. As your son is older, you can try alarms. You can have alarms that will sound when the mattress gets wet, and sometimes they work and sometimes they don't. But here's what you need to know. Your son's going to outgrow this. and he'll probably outgrow it sooner than later. There's nothing wrong with him. He is physically fine. He's emotionally fine. He's psychologically fine. It's a nuisance. You shouldn't shame him for this because he can't control it. Don't make him get up and change his sheets and make us do his own laundry and lead him to believe that this is somehow his fault. It isn't. So I would just encourage you to be patient. Don't talk about it. Don't make a big issue, and revisit it in a year or two if he's still doing it. Parents, I love answering your questions, so please keep sending them to me. You can email me your parenting questions to askmeg@megmeekermd.com. Again, askmeg@megmeekermd.com. I want to thank my guest and my friend Jim Daly. This has been a wonderful podcast. Before I go, I'd like to recap my points to ponder. First, do not let your mistakes trip you up and keep you stuck in your parenting. 2, focus on getting the big stuff right. And 3, please give yourself some kindness today and tomorrow and next week. It's terribly important, and you deserve it. And remember, until next time, parents, great kids are raised, not born.
Hey, this is Bobby, producer of Meg Meeker's Parenting Great Kids podcast. We hope you've enjoyed listening to episode 31, When Parenting Isn't Perfect. And thanks to you, Dr. Meg's Parenting Revolution has grown to over 500,000 downloads. You can like Dr. Meeker on Facebook and follow her on Twitter and Instagram @MegMeekerMD. Just as a reminder, go to megmeekermd.com and sign up for her newsletter for giveaway opportunities and updates. And don't forget to share the podcast, write us a review, and click subscribe so you won't miss an episode.